I remember playing this game many years ago. For the first time, I 'cause there was this trend, like back when I was young. You play a game, the game is linear, just follow through a story and quests, and then you're done with it. It's um, it's done. You accomplish the objective and then finish the game. The thing is, this game, you, you have no idea what this game is. This is the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. If you don't know what this game is, I mean, I don't know. This is probably one of the most famous games ever made that simply won't die. Been over 10 years and this game is still alive. And I remember playing the first part of the story of this game. Then it introduces you to some basic mechanics. But after that, it will actually give you this open world feeling. Right? So after a few minutes of playing through maybe 2 or 3 quests, you will be immersed into this world or thrown into this world. And most players who were accustomed to this straightforward game, many of us just feels, lost into this game. We don't know what to do. The idea is just you go any direction you want and then you just play the game. And this world is not small. This world is not small. It's so huge. There was a point where I actually thought, what if I will just walk through the entire place from one point to the next, just walking and jogging through all of this. I mean, this is a huge place. There's actually another portion of it here which I haven't checked out yet. I've been a while since I played this game. This is a huge place. However, if you watched the previous video and saw me playing Elder Scrolls Online, the weird thing is, this is just a province of that game. So that game is tremendously big. Like if this is a province, that game is a continent. And you're supposed to just wander off, right? And it's very different from the one that I was used to at that time, because there's no set goal. You have to find people to give you quests, otherwise you're just roaming around like what I'm doing now, and then I don't know, just somehow play the game. That's the idea. Now, most of the complaints really by many of the players, even today, people who are playing the Elder Scrolls Online, the main complaint is that after playing through a set of introductory quests, either right now you will start in Western Skyrim, will start this place in ESO, or you will start in Vanderfell, or you will play the main story. Whichever is the case, there's so many beginnings in that game. So, but after you play through a set of quests, somehow gives the impression that the main story you're in already done, and then you realize, so what to do now? And then you begin to explore the world, and then you realize there's an F ton of quests that you haven't finished yet. Heck, I've played Elder Scrolls Online for like almost 9,000 hours already, and I'm not really sure where I'm heading in that game. So much content, and many complaints would come from the idea that they are so lost. They don't know what to do. They don't know. They don't know path, which direction to take, etc. And that's been the character of open world games, which are today kind of the norm. So when you play ESO or when you play World of Warcraft uh, or any MMO or worse, if you play, for example, The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt or Skyrim, you are placed or thrown into this world of so much content that sometimes you don't really know what to do anymore. Now, why did I start from this perspective? Because, come to think of it, life itself, although
I can take you.
we're not really immortal, so our life is on a set ending. We know we're going to die someday, but there's just too much of the world to explore, and we don't know where to begin. And it's precisely because of the idea that we don't know where to begin that really sets the mood of our existence. Just like in the game, we can go all out lost to whatever life can bring us. So at least in the game, there are certain sets of objectives that are definite and that you cannot really derail from it. Like, for example, this game, you look at the objectives, there's more, and these are actually objectives that I've completed already. At least there's a set of objectives that you need to do. But in life, the objectives are usually not set, not set by anyone unless you accept what other people can give you. But anyway, my point here, why I start with this, is there's just too much to explore, too much to do, and with limited time. I mean, seriously, I'm not going to play this game like 24 hours. That would be bizarre. So, limited time, too much to explore. But that's basically what life is outside of this game, or outside of any games you're playing. There's too much to explore, and that's probably how I will start this video. The idea that there's so much about life that sometimes we get lost along the way. The problem is, just like what Heidegger would say, we care so much about the world that we cannot not care. And it is precisely because of this very caring of us that for him the proper response is anxiety. So let me just get out of here first and set the mood for Heidegger. Now, if you're not familiar with Heidegger, he wrote this book titled Being and Time. Not the simplest book you'll ever read, but if you get the kind of um, key to understanding his book, it's actually easier once you get to know the book that well. There's part of the book that I no longer enjoy. The existentialist part I no longer enjoy. Heidegger himself admitted, I think, that that part of his book is, especially this second part here. This is the diagram of his book Being in Time. This one comes from um, Professor Lawrence Cahun from the teaching company. The second part of his book, this is actually the first part here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is the first part of the book. This is the second part of the book. There was supposed to be a part 2 of the book, but Heidegger probably realized the second part sucks. Decided not to do it anymore. But Being in Time is literally just being in time. So if you look at here at the bottom line, the essence or the context of the meaning of being is temporality. We'll get to that. Now I will start with this idea of Dasein, of being there. Dasein is just basically you being thrown in the world. That's just it. You're thrown into a world. There's no reason for it. There's no explanation for it. It's just basically you're just there. And it's not just you're there, you're also in the world. In the world here, something like you belong to a definite culture, tradition, history. You're part of that world, so to speak. And excuse me, in that world, you are in some ways you are already participant in that world, and your presence is in some ways viewed by people as a sort of function in that world. Like your presence means that you must perform a function in it. In a sense, you're ready at hand and then present at hand. You're there and then you're there for something within that world. But being in this part, oh, this is Heidegger, by the way. Being in means our engagement in the world is divided into 3 structures that are, let's just say, they happen simultaneously all the time, except that what Heidegger is doing here is slow time down so that we can segregate these portions or aspects of what it means to be being in. You are, when you're born, you're part of the world, and these 3, understanding, state of mind, and the day, they all are, let's just say, they constitute our reality. What we say reality is basically these 3. The first one is understanding, is basically just the future. You project a future of what you want to become. The second one is state of mind, which is at every moment you always carry the burden of a past. Something happened, set you in a mood. You carry that in every present. So you have in your present every past. And you use that past in order to project. But you are not just merely doing here a Cartesian, I think therefore I am, of using my rationality and consciousness in order to project my future, you're actually using materials from the present, from people around you, from objects around you, from technology around you. And why are you doing all this? Because when you are thrown into the world, you suffer the anxiety. Same way when I said about being thrown into the world of Skyrim, and you have no idea what to do after a series of quests. Here, it gets worse. Meaning our natural condition is actually worse than that game. When we were born, all we had is we begin to feel that there is some sort of rules of relationships, um, structures of relationships, these socio-symbolic networks that we have, of rules of language, of all of that. And somehow we, because we care so much about the world, that's why when we were born and we were young, we always ask questions because we care. That's the idea of Zorga. We just care. It's nothing to do with you care about someone, etc., etc. Here, we just care about the world. We keep on asking questions like, why am I here? What are my parents for? What is education for? All this stuff. Who is this person? Who is that person? What is the function of that person? What is this? What is that? What is the color of this book? Etc. etc. There's just too much about the world that we need to know. And because we cannot not care, we always ask these questions. And for Heidegger, the proper response here is anxiety. Not the way we use the term anxiety nowadays. People, time and time again, we hear people, say something like anxiety attacks and all of that. Anxiety here is this tremendous feeling that something in the world, that there is something in the world that we don't really know that much. That's the idea. Now, this video is actually an introduction. Sorry, an introduction, but kind of I will introduce some of the terms that I'm fond of, so that in future videos you will not be lost as to what the hell I'm talking about. And this video is about the bard subject. So remember the idea I presented about open world games and how it's difficult to set your own path. It's not really difficult, but there's a sense of difficulty and anxiety present in setting up open world games. But this is actually just a kind of reflection of what we are in real life. That in real life we're thrown into the world, and that there are rules that we have to consider, and sometimes there's anxiety involved in the feeling that we are lost, that there's something that we don't know. We care for the world so much, not in a sense, again, not in the sense that we care about the world and saving the world, but we care about the world so much that we ask about the world itself. Why are we here? Why is this my language? Blah blah blah, etc., etc., so on and so on. Okay, so that's the point. Now, the second one that I would want to emphasize here is, if you remember in the previous video, I already mentioned about Lacan and his book, The Écrit. Now, I want to emphasize this little graph in that book, The Écrit. Many Lacanians would call this one the elementary cell of the graph of desire. And I want to focus on this, then hopefully I can go to the more advanced part of this one. So anyway, we all start here. This is us being thrown into the world. But this graph happens so fast. We continue the trend of being in time, of trying to slow down time so that we can see what is there to see about being. But this one happens so fast. What do we mean by being thrown into the world? Well, when we were thrown, Lacan has probably a funny way of placing in this graph what we imagine of being thrown. This is basically what says being this path. And this is the world. Right? This is the point, this is our originary point in this graph. This blank triangle. This was our state when we were given birth. When we haven't developed yet the consciousness, the identification of ourselves in the mirror, when we did not develop that one yet, that's our originary position. But then when we were born, and even if before we were born, names were already imagined for us. Our family name was already set. These signifiers, or this chain of signifiers, will literally determine what we will become eventually. The family you're in, you did not choose that. You were thrown to that. The condition of the family you're in, you did not choose that one as well. You're also thrown to that. All of this is not our choosing. We're simply thrown into the world. And this world, or culture, or history, or tradition, these are, for Lacan, a chain of signifiers, of words, of many words, of signifiers indicating each other, pointing at each other, and we are thrown to that. The end product of this thrownness is this capital S with a bar. This is called the barred subject. So what happens here is we are born, we are thrown into the world. This world is constituted by language, culture, history, tradition, sets of meanings, sets of signs and their meanings. We are thrown to that world, and the product is, as what Heidegger would say, anxiety. What is this anxiety? We begin to imagine ourselves as part of that world, except we're not really sure which part are we in. What function am I supposed to play? As a kid, what is my position in the family? What is my relationship to my brothers, to my sisters, to other siblings, to my cousins, to my parents? These are questions that, in a way, Lacan would say the position of hysteria, the position of the hysteric. There is a world, and you begin to realize that. You begin to understand, okay, there's a world, I'm in this world, but what specifically am I supposed to do in this world? What is being expected of me? Right? So what happens is you begin to be divided by the things that you are certain, and then the things that you don't really know. somehow there's always lacking some there's this sense of lack that you feel. You understand the world, yes. You have an understanding of the world, yes. But there's always something else, something that is missing. And this is the reason why people would use expressions like, I am soul searching, I'm trying to find myself. Those expressions. It's not that you lost your soul, it's not that you lost yourself, just that you feel like there's something missing, that there's a void inside of you. That is the barred subject. You are a subject. You are incomplete. And the other idea of the barred subject is you are incomplete and you will never be complete. Because the world within which you live always offers you a kind of, or a set of reasons, set of signifiers that would tell you that your life is not yet done. It's not yet complete. And for Lacan, this is the very root of desire. This is just how the barred subject emerges out of us. The next graph is complicated. Now we start from the barred subject as the originary position because there's no other way. This one, there's no going back from this. Lacan's way of saying this is, once we are born, we get injected into this world. Language is going to fuck us. And when we are fucked by language, there's no unfucking. There's no going back to this original position. We always begin with the barred subject. The subject is not complete. That's actually the title of this article in his book is the subversion of the subject and the dialectics of desire. The subject is subverted, meaning for the most part when we deal with psychology, they always presume the united image or the complete image of a subject. The ego as complete, the subject as complete. Always a presumption of that. For Lacan, there's no such thing. The subject always feels this sense of lack, and this sense of lack is the root of desire. Alright, so we always start with this. This big letter A here is actually just the other. In French, this one is big letter A, autre. The other is basically the other. The other is what Heidegger would say, for example, as the they, Dasein. This is the world we are in when we establish relationship with other people. We establish relationship as being alongside entities. These entities, these constitute the other. More or less your culture itself, the society you are in. That's the big other. Not a specific individual, but like society, culture in general. Our relationship with that, as we begin to recognize the big other, we only recognize it by way of this one here. Small letter I with small letter A in parentheses. This is what Lacan calls um, the ideal ego. When we were kids, we start forming um, imaginary, almost phantasmatic versions of ourselves. Like we begin to project ourselves without limits. We have an understanding of what we will be in the future. Nothing definite, sometimes almost, as I've said, phantasmatic. I can still remember the projections of myself when I was still a kid. They appear bizarre now, almost irrational, and all of that. I know you imagine yourselves to be someone else. Like uh, back then, that's the idea. But this ideal ego is complete, full subject that we presume um, is our only way to the other. We have to start somewhere, and this starting position can either lead us to the idea of this letter M here is simply misrecognition. Lacan's term is méconnaissance. It's this point wherein as we grow up here, coupled with our understanding of the society we are in, usually we begin to understand that in the process of building ourselves, we certainly have misrepresentations, misconceptions, misrecognitions, and all of that. Just like what Hegel said, we always begin with errors. We don't begin perfect and then lose that perfection. We always begin with this part here, this primitive part being, remember, we are um, Bard's subject. So there's always something missing. We always feel that. Sometimes we feel, oh, the ideal ego is perfect, etc. But then there's always some kind of imperfection produced from it. Um, Let me just continue with this one. Our relationship with the big other usually is a kind of engagement in the world. We're just here, you are just being there, you engage with other people, with your society, with your community, with your culture, and then it is coming from this engagement that you begin to form this, not necessarily misrecognitions, although that would be part of it. That's why Lacan plays an arrow from here to there. So this is your kind of, this is how you imagine what your culture and society is. Kind of misrecognition on some point, a kind of understanding on some point. But this symbol is kind of like you finally have an understanding of the society, the culture, the history, the tradition that you are in. That may not necessarily be perfect, accurate, and without any error in the beginning. As I've said, we always start with misrecognition anyway. So we always have this feeling that we understand something about our society. That's why this arrow and this arrow kind of forms like a loop. The more you engage, the more you form an understanding. This understanding, you will reflect on your interpretation of society, but then another engagement comes in that will lead to maybe, there's always something hermeneutic about this, the kind of change in how you deal with society, and then that will reflect again and again, right? But the end product of this, out of this your ideal ego, your idealized version of yourself, your relationship with the big other, with your community, your society, and then your ideas of it. Maybe a form of misrecognition at some point, but the end product to yourself is what Lacan would call the ego ideal. This is your ego in relation with your engagement with a big other. Not pure imagination. Unlike the ideal ego, ideal ego doesn't have any compromise. This is imagination, almost at its purest. You imagine yourself to be something, someone, some superhero, whatever. This one, however, becomes more definite. This is a product of the other and your understanding, your subjectivization of the other. Out of misrecognition, the production of your ego ideal. This is the point where you can definitely say that what you will be in the future is not something out of the ordinary, out of some fantasy, out of some, I don't know, out of watching too much Marvel cinematic universe, all of that. This is, let's just say, more realistic. Again, what we have here is the passing of signifiers. So we get all of this from signifiers. This one here, the voice. Imagine the voice as something like, this is my voice within my culture. Man, do not imagine this one simply as the voice coming out of your mouth, although that's part of it. But use this idea in a way, something like when you say, do I have a voice in this, or where is my voice in this decision making, and all of that. Your voice comes from your understanding of your own symbolic network. This one, these two. Your voice comes from that. It does not come from some innate natural soul substance or whatever. It comes from this. That's why language is a tricky thing. Now, if some of you would remember the Sapir-Whorf theory of language, wherein your projection of the world, your creation of reality depends upon the language or the capacity of the language you are in, that's basically the idea. The voice, your voice within your culture, is actually a product of the language of that culture, or in general terms, the other.